My name is Elena and I am 29 years old, living in the heart of Paris, a city that whispers tales of romance and grandeur, but often shouts realities of struggle when you are like me. Every morning before the city truly wakes, I am already on the move, the cold cobblestones of my street a familiar feeling beneath my worn boots. My small apartment, just big enough for a bed and a rickety table, smells perpetually of cheap coffee and old paint. That paint smell is my secret joy, a tiny rebellion against the everyday grind. I dream of being an illustrator, of bringing stories to life with my hands, of creating worlds vibrant and hopeful. But most days, the only canvas I see is a restaurant floor or a stranger's bathroom. I work as a cleaner by day, scrubbing away the remnants of other people's lives, and as a waitress by night, serving meals I could barely afford myself. My hands, which long to hold a fine brush, instead carry heavy trays and wheeled mops. The tips are rarely enough, but every euro counts, every single one is a step closer to a new set of paints, a better quality paper, or even just a deposit for an online art course that could teach me new techniques. I see the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the distance from my attic window, a beacon of beauty and possibility, and it reminds me that this city holds magic, even for someone like me. But sometimes, when the exhaustion clings to me like the dust I spend my days sweeping away, I wonder if that magic is only for others, for the tourists with their bright cameras and carefree laughter. My biggest fear, my constant companion in the quiet hours, is that I am not good enough, that my dreams are childish fantasies, that I will forever be stuck just surviving, watching life pass me by instead of truly living it. This doubt, this quiet enemy, whispers to me that I should give up, that my art is not important, that my dreams are just a burden. I tried so hard to prove that voice wrong. I would wake an hour earlier or stay up an hour later, sketching in my small notebook, the cheap pencil scratching softly against the paper. My fingers would ache, my eyes would burn, but I kept going, trying to capture the light of the city, the hidden corners, the expressions on people's faces. I started saving every spare euro, tucking away coins and small bills into an old shoebox under my bed. My goal was clear: to save enough for a week-long intensive illustration workshop that promised to connect artists with publishers. It felt like a mountain to climb, a truly daunting goal, but it was my mountain. I took on extra shifts, scrubbing even more floors, serving even more demanding customers, smiling until my cheeks hurt. I cut back on everything, buying only the cheapest bread and vegetables, drinking only tap water. I even stopped taking the metro sometimes, walking for miles to save the €2. I believed that if I worked hard enough, truly sacrificed, I could make it. But life has a way of throwing wrenches into the most carefully laid plans. First, the old vacuum cleaner I used for my cleaning jobs finally gave up, sputtering its last breath of dust and smoke. It cost me 2 weeks of my precious savings to replace it with a second-hand one that smelled faintly of burnt toast. Then, a freelance illustration job I had been counting on, a small commission for a local cafe menu, fell through when the owner decided to go with his niece instead. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, a sinking feeling that grew heavier with each setback. My landlord then announced a small but significant increase in my rent, saying it was due to rising costs in the building. It felt like someone was taking handfuls of my savings away just as I was trying to fill the box. Then, the worst happened. I caught a terrible flu that kept me bedridden for 5 days. I couldn't work, couldn't earn, and the small amount I had saved for emergencies disappeared, spent on medicine and food I desperately needed. I watched the numbers in my shoebox dwindle, the workshop deposit now feeling further away than ever. It felt like I was running on a treadmill, running as fast as I could, but never actually moving forward. One rainy evening, utterly defeated, I pulled out my shoebox. I counted the remaining euros, the pitiful stack feeling lighter than air. It was barely enough to cover my half of the rent for the next month. The workshop, my dream, was a distant, unreachable star. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, cold and suffocating. My internal nemesis, the doubt, roared louder than ever before. "See," it sneered, "you're not meant for this. You're meant for scrubbing floors, for serving others. Your dreams are foolish." I wanted to scream, to cry, but I was too tired. I just sat there, staring at the small, worn children's book I had bought years ago from a flea market, its cover faded but its stories still full of wonder. It had always been a source of comfort, a reminder of the magic I wanted to create. But that night, even its worn pages felt heavy with the weight of my failure. I felt like giving up entirely, like packing my few belongings and leaving Paris, leaving my foolish dreams behind. I picked up the old children's book, a collection of fairy tales, its pages soft from countless readings. I ran my thumb over the worn illustration on the cover, a whimsical castle surrounded by flying creatures. It had always reminded me of the adventures I longed for, the magic I hoped to capture in my own art. A sigh escaped me, heavy with resignation. I decided to flip through it one last time, just to feel a connection to something beautiful before I let the despair consume me completely. My fingers traced the words, the familiar rhythm of the stories a small comfort. Then, as I reached a page depicting a brave knight setting off on a journey, something crisp and green fluttered to the floor. I stared at it, my mind too numb to comprehend. I bent down slowly and picked it up. It was a €5 note, folded neatly. My brow furrowed. Had I put it there? No, I never folded money like that. I continued flipping, my heart starting to beat a little faster. On the very next page, another €5 note, and then another, tucked deep inside a drawing of a friendly dragon. My hands began to tremble. There were 5 of them in total, tucked throughout the book, not randomly, but almost deliberately placed near illustrations of adventure and bravery. €50. Not a fortune, but more money than I had found in weeks, certainly more than I had in my emergency fund. And then, near the very last page, where the princess finally found her way home, I found a tiny slip of paper folded into a square. My fingers fumbled as I opened it. In elegant, looping handwriting, it simply read, "For your next adventure." My breath caught in my throat. Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked at my eyes. It wasn't just the money, it was the message. Someone, a complete stranger, had intentionally hidden this gift, this message of hope, in a children's book. It was an act of unexpected kindness so pure, so thoughtful, that it shattered the walls of my despair. It felt like a whisper from the universe, telling me not to give up, that someone, somewhere, believed in adventure, believed in me, even if they didn't know me. It was the climax of my struggle, the moment everything shifted. I clutched the money and the note to my chest, a profound warmth spreading through me. I didn't have enough for the workshop deposit, not yet. But I had €50, and more importantly, I had a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't about the money, it was about the belief. It was about taking a leap of faith. The next morning, the sun seemed to shine brighter. The €50 wasn't enough for the workshop, but it was enough to do something else, something that had always felt too indulgent. I walked to a small art supply shop I had admired for months, the one with the vibrant window display. I bought a set of high-quality watercolor paints and a pad of thick, beautiful paper. My hands trembled as I paid, not from fear but from excitement. I went straight home, cleared my rickety table, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I painted purely for myself, letting the colors flow, telling the story of the old children's book and the unexpected gift. I painted a child's hand reaching for a hidden note, a tiny castle in the background, a dragon smiling in the corner. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive with the hope that had been rekindled in my heart. A few days later, emboldened by this small success, I saw an advertisement for a local artist's market in a small park. It asked for a tiny fee to rent a stall, a fee I could now just barely afford. My internal nemesis whispered doubts, but the memory of the little note, "For your next adventure," pushed me forward. I gathered my best illustrations, including the one inspired by the book, and set up a small table. People stopped. They looked. They smiled. To my astonishment, I sold 2 small prints that day, not enough to quit my cleaning job, but enough to fuel my spirit. This was my new normal. I continued to work my jobs, but now the moments I dedicated to my art felt different. They were infused with hope, with the knowledge that kindness existed, that magic could be found in the most unexpected places. My confidence grew, slowly but surely. I started getting small commissions again, enough to eventually afford that workshop, and then more. I never forgot that day. The €5 notes and the tiny message changed my path, and so I started my own small tradition. Every time I sold a piece, every time I had a little extra money, I would buy a second-hand children's book from a charity shop. I would carefully tuck a €5 note inside a page that spoke of dreams or journeys, and I would write my own small note, "For your next adventure." I would leave the book on a park bench, in a public library, or on a cafe table, hoping it would find its way to someone who needed it, just as I had. I wanted to pay forward that unexpected kindness, to remind someone else that hope always exists, even in the darkest moments. Years passed. My art flourished. I eventually saved enough to open a small studio in a quieter part of Paris, where the light poured in and my art could finally breathe. My illustrations were now in children's books, my dream realized. One afternoon, while I was organizing a small exhibition of my recent works, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright with admiration. She held one of my illustrated books in her hands, a story about a young artist overcoming challenges. "Your work is so inspiring," she said softly. "It actually reminds me of why I never gave up on my own dream of becoming a musician. I was at my lowest point, just after university, feeling completely lost and out of place in this huge city. I found an old children's book on a park bench, and inside there was a €5 note and a tiny message that simply said, 'For your next adventure.' It was exactly what I needed to hear, a sign that I should keep going." I looked at her, a lump forming in my throat. I didn't say anything, just smiled, my eyes glistening. The circle of kindness, the ripple effect, was real. It was right here, standing in front of me. I realized that the most profound adventures are not just about finding your own way, but about helping others find theirs. It was a beautiful twist of fate, a perfect harmony that proved things truly do get better, that a single act of kindness can echo through time, creating a symphony of hope that continues to play on, long after the initial note has faded.